Elijah Washington stared at the bloodied badge in his palm, the station burning behind him. 3 corrupt officers down, 2 more to go. He never wanted this war, but when they came for his business and freedom, because of his skin color, they awakened something deadly. Before we dive into this shocking story of corruption and justice, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit that like button and subscribe if you're ready to see what happens when corrupt cops target the wrong black business owner. The system thought it could crush him, but they had no idea who they were really dealing with. Elijah Washington wiped the counter of Circuit Solutions for the 3rd time that morning, a habit from his military days where cleanliness and order were drilled into him alongside tactical precision and lethal efficiency. At 42 years old, his 6'2" frame remained imposingly fit, though he'd traded his combat uniform for button-up shirts and slacks 5 years ago. The electronic repair shop in Oakland, California represented everything he'd fought for during his 15 years as a Delta Force commander specialized in tactical operations, counter-terrorism, and psychological warfare. The shop was his peace, his sanctuary, after witnessing too much death across 3 continents. Opening a business in this predominantly white commercial district hadn't been easy for a black man, even one with his distinguished service record. The neighboring business owners initially gave him cold shoulders and suspicious glances, as if an electronics repair shop owned by a black man must be a front for something illegal. Elijah bore it all with the patience of someone who had survived far worse, focusing instead on building Circuit Solutions into the most reputable repair service in the area. The pristine shop featured cutting-edge diagnostic equipment, clean workstations, and a front area designed to make customers feel comfortable leaving their expensive devices in his care. Elijah employed only 2 people: Darius Jackson, a 23-year-old black tech genius from the neighborhood whom Elijah had mentored since he was caught shoplifting components at 17, and Sarah Connolly, a white woman in her 30s who had applied for the job when no one else would hire a single mother with no college degree, but impressive self-taught technical skills. Elijah valued loyalty and skill above all else, and both employees had proven themselves worthy of his trust. Lately, though, something had been off. The health inspector had visited 3 times in 2 months, each time finding nothing but returning with new anonymous complaints. Parking enforcement seemed to target only the vehicles parked near his shop, and customers sometimes mentioned being questioned by police about what services they'd received. Just yesterday, Elijah had received notice of a city council meeting where concerns about businesses disrupting the commercial character of the district would be discussed, a thinly veiled reference to his shop. Elijah noticed the dark sedan parked across the street, the same one that had been there intermittently for weeks. The man inside wasn't as subtle as he thought he was, at least not to someone trained to spot surveillance. Detective James Holloway considered himself untouchable in Oakland's 12th precinct. At 54, he'd built a network of 4 loyal officers who followed his lead, Officers Wilson, Reeves, Carter, and Murphy. Together they ran a protection racket targeting minority-owned businesses that had operated successfully for years. From his vantage point, Holloway observed Circuit Solutions with calculating eyes. The steady stream of customers, carrying expensive electronics, the high-end equipment visible through the windows, and the recent renovation that had expanded the shop's footprint, all suggested a profitable business ripe for their attention. He watched Elijah help an elderly woman with her laptop, noting the man's composed demeanor and courteous manner. Another weak business owner who would pay up rather than risk losing everything, Holloway thought. Easy money. What Holloway failed to recognize was the way Elijah's eyes scanned the street at regular intervals, how he positioned himself to observe the sedan without appearing to look directly at it, and the almost imperceptible tension in his basset, shoulders that signaled not fear but readiness. Elijah had survived ambushes in Baghdad and Kandahar. He'd led hostage rescues in territories where discovery meant certain death. He'd trained for years to notice things others missed, and right now every instinct told him trouble was coming. Still, he maintained his cover as just another shop owner, never revealing the tactical awareness that had kept him alive in dozens of operations. Later that evening, as Holloway drove away, he called Officer Wilson. "We've got our next target," he said, smiling to himself. "Circuit Solutions on Broadway. Black owner seems to be doing well for himself. Too well if you ask me. Time he contributed to our retirement fund." What Holloway didn't know, what he couldn't possibly understand, was that he wasn't targeting just another minority business owner scared of the police. He was walking into the carefully constructed life of a man who had spent his career eliminating threats far more dangerous than a corrupt cop with delusions of power. The game was about to begin, but Elijah Washington would be the one making the rules. The Tuesday afternoon rush at Circuit Solutions was in full swing when Officers Wilson and Reeves pushed through the door, their presence immediately casting a pall over the busy shop. Officer Wilson, a stocky man with close-cropped hair and perpetually narrowed eyes, scanned the store with obvious contempt, while Officer Reeves, taller and leaner with a scar running along his jaw, positioned himself near the exit. Elijah was explaining a complex laptop repair to a young college student when he noticed the sudden silence that had fallen. Without missing a beat in his explanation, he observed the officers' positioning, their hand placement, their eye movements, all data points his brain processed automatically from years of threat assessment. Darius, working at the repair counter, visibly tensed. The young man had experienced enough police harassment in his 23 years to recognize the pattern unfolding. 3 customers quietly slipped out the door, unwilling to be caught in whatever was about to happen. "Excuse me," Elijah said to his customer, his voice calm and measured. "Let me see what our visitors need." He approached the officers with a neutral expression, his hands visible at his sides, a habit from approaching checkpoints in hostile territory. "Welcome to Circuit Solutions. How can I help you officers today?" Officer Wilson stepped forward, one hand resting suggestively on his holster. "We've received some complaints about this establishment. Reports of stolen merchandise being sold here." His eyes lingered deliberately on a row of refurbished phones in the display case. "Stolen merchandise," Elijah's tone remained professional, betraying none of the calculations running through his mind. "There must be some mistake. Every item in this shop is legitimately acquired and fully documented." Officer Reeves snorted derisively. "That's what they all say. We'll need to conduct an inspection." Without waiting for permission, the officers began moving through the shop, opening drawers, and examining items on shelves. Elijah watched as Officer Wilson accidentally knocked an expensive oscilloscope to the floor, its screen cracking on impact. "Oops," Wilson said with a smirk. "Clumsy me." The remaining customers quickly paid and left as the officers continued their aggressive search. Sarah stepped forward when Reeves began roughly handling a customer's half-repaired gaming console. "Excuse me, that belongs to a customer, and the internal components are exposed," she said firmly. "You could damage it." Officer Reeves turned sharply, pushing Sarah back with enough force to send her stumbling against the counter. "Stay out of police business, lady, unless you want to be charged with obstruction." Elijah's eyes narrowed slightly, the only outward sign of the cold anger building within him. He helped Sarah steady herself, his touch on her arm gentle, but his eyes never leaving the officers. "Sarah, please take your break now," he said quietly. She hesitated, then nodded and retreated to the back room. The message in Officer Reeves' action was clear: they could and would use force if challenged. After 20 minutes of deliberate intimidation, Officer Wilson emerged from the back storage area holding a laptop. "Well, well, what do we have here?" he announced triumphantly. "Serial number matches one reported stolen last month." Elijah immediately recognized the laptop as one that had never been in his inventory. "That's not one of our items," he stated calmly, though he knew it was pointless. This was a setup, and the script had been written long before they walked in. "The evidence says otherwise," Officer Reeves countered, moving closer to Elijah. "This is a serious offense. Could mean the end of your business, maybe even jail time." He leaned in, dropping his voice. "Unless, of course, you're smart enough to understand how things work in this neighborhood." Elijah said nothing, taking in every detail of the officers' behavior, noting their confidence in their scheme, the practiced nature of the threat suggesting this was a routine they'd performed many times before. Officer Wilson pulled out a business card and wrote a number on the back: $5,000 by Thursday. Cash only. Consider it a consultation fee for ongoing police protection. He slid the card across the counter. "Otherwise, we'll have to shut you down for receiving stolen property. And trust me, you don't want to see what happens to businesses that try to fight this or go to internal affairs." Elijah picked up the card, studying it before slipping it into his pocket. "I understand," he said, quietly, projecting the image of a businessman who knew he was beaten. 48 hours. Officer Reeves smiled the expression, never reaching his eyes. "Smart man. We'll be back Thursday afternoon. Have it ready." As they moved toward the door, Officer Wilson turned back. "Oh, and fix that attitude of your female employee. Not good for business to have staff who disrespect law enforcement." After the officers left, Elijah moved methodically through his shop, calming the few remaining customers with a composure that seemed remarkable given what they'd just witnessed. "I apologize for the interruption," he told an elderly woman who had hidden in the computer accessories aisle during the encounter. "Your tablet will be ready tomorrow as promised." Once the last customer had departed, Elijah locked the front door and flipped the sign to closed. Darius emerged from where he'd been silently watching. "Mr. Washington, those cops just planted evidence and threatened you. We need to call someone, report them, do something." Elijah shook his head slightly. Reporting corrupt officers to potentially corrupt supervisors is rarely effective. He moved to a hidden panel behind the register counter and pressed a sequence of numbers on what appeared to be a circuit breaker box. The panel slid open to reveal a sophisticated surveillance system with multiple camera feeds showing every angle of the shop, especially when they don't know they've already given us everything we need. Sarah came from the back room, her expression a mixture of anger and fear. "You were recording them, thank God. We can fight this." Elijah's expression remained unreadable as he extracted a small memory card from the system. Fighting requires strategy, timing, and understanding your enemy. He pulled out his phone and dialed a number he hadn't used in years. When the line connected, he spoke just 9 words. "Remember that contingency plan we discussed? It's time." He ended the call and turned to his employees, his decision already made. The corrupt officers had just declared war on the wrong man. After sending Darius and Sarah home with instructions to take a paid week off for their safety, Elijah Washington locked the doors of Circuit Solutions and began his preparations. The empty shop hummed with silence as he moved with practiced efficiency, transforming from business owner back to the Delta Force commander he had been for 15 years. As Elijah activated additional surveillance systems concealed throughout his shop, memories from his military training surfaced with crystal clarity. He recalled the voice of his first commander at Fort Bragg intelligence gathering is the foundation of every successful operation. Know your enemy better than they know themselves, and victory is inevitable. The philosophy had saved his life, and the lives of his team members countless times in combat zones around the world. Now those same skills would protect everything he had built in civilian life. The sophisticated equipment Elijah deployed was far beyond what any normal shop owner would possess. Directional microphones that could capture conversations 100 yards away, thermal imaging cameras that worked through walls and EverSAF, satellite-linked trackers smaller than dimes. To anyone watching, he appeared to be doing routine maintenance on his security system. In reality, he was establishing a tactical operations center focused on 5 specific targets. "Begin with the weakest link," Elijah murmured to himself as he pulled up Officer Wilson's public records on his computer. By midnight, Elijah had positioned himself in an unmarked van 3 blocks from Officer Wilson's apartment building. Through high-powered optics, he observed the officer exit a police cruiser and check his surroundings before heading not home, but toward a nondescript building several streets away. Elijah followed at a distance, his movements silent and practiced. The building turned out to be an underground gambling establishment, operating under the guise of a private club. Wilson spent 3 hours inside, emerging, looking distressed and considerably poorer based on his body language. Elijah documented everything, adding it to the growing profile of his adversaries. Over the next 36 hours, Elijah slept only in brief increments as he meticulously built a comprehensive picture of the corrupt network. Using contacts from his military days, Now working in various government databases, he uncovered a pattern of minority-owned businesses that had either closed or changed ownership shortly after the officers began patrolling those areas. Detective Holloway's financial records revealed property holdings worth over $2 million, including a vacation home in Lake Tahoe and 3 rental properties in gentrifying neighborhoods, assets impossible to acquire on his official salary of $87,000 annually. By Wednesday afternoon, Elijah had visited 7 former business owners who had been targeted by the same officers. Most refused to speak with him initially, fear evident in their eyes. But Elijah's calm persistence eventually broke through their silence. The most revealing conversation came from Marcus Jenkins, owner of a once-thriving Jamaican restaurant that now stood empty, its windows boarded up. They started with small things. Jenkins explained, his voice heavy with defeat, as they sat in his small apartment. Health code violations that never existed before, parking tickets for customers. Then the visit started. He described the same pattern: planted evidence, demands for protection money, and escalating threats when he couldn't keep up with the increasing demands. When I tried to report them, my restaurant was raided for drugs. They planted enough to charge me with intent to distribute. I lost everything fighting the case. Tears welled in the man's eyes. 20 years building that business. Gone in a month because I stood up to them. Elijah placed a hand on Jenkins' shoulder, his resolve hardening. How many others? He asked quietly. At least 15 businesses in the last 3 years, Jenkins replied. All minority-owned. All replaced with businesses that fit what they call the right profile for the neighborhood. As Elijah continued his investigation, he discovered that Officer Reeves had 17 excessive force complaints filed against him, all involving black suspects, and all mysteriously dismissed without investigation. The corruption extended beyond the 5 officers, with evidence pointing to at least 2 lieutenants who received percentages of the extortion money in exchange for quashing investigations and redirecting complaints. Back at his apartment that night, Elijah spread photos of each officer on his dining table, studying their faces as he had once studied enemy combatant profiles before high-risk missions. He traced connections between them, identified vulnerabilities, and began formulating a multi-phase strategy drawing on military psychological operations tactics. For each corrupt officer, he devised a specific approach based on their particular weaknesses: Wilson's gambling debts, Reeves' barely controlled violence, Carter's desperate need to please Holloway, and Murphy's cowardice when confronted. For Holloway himself, the architect of the operation, Elijah reserved a special strategy. The detective's arrogance would be his undoing. Do you think Elijah should go straight to internal affairs with what he's discovered, or is he right to handle this himself, considering how deep the corruption goes? Comment number 1, if you believe the system might still work if given the right evidence, or number 2, if you think he needs to take justice into his own hands. Like and subscribe if you want to see what happens when these corrupt officers realize they've picked the wrong target. I've been wondering, what would you do if faced with systematic corruption that threatened everything you've worked for? The next part of our story shows Elijah's first move against these corrupt officers. And trust me, it's not what anyone would expect. Thursday afternoon arrived with an oppressive heat that shimmered above the Oakland pavement, matching the tension building inside Circuit Solutions as Elijah Washington prepared to implement the first phase of his plan. He'd reopened the shop that morning, operating with deliberate normalcy, while Darius and Sarah remained safely away. At precisely 3:15, officers Wilson and Reeves pushed through the door, joined this time by Officer Carter, a heavy-set man with cold eyes who positioned himself near the security cameras, unaware they had already been modified to serve Elijah's purposes. Right on time, Elijah said, his voice carefully modulated to convey nervousness. He'd spent an hour before their arrival constructing the perfect mask of a frightened business owner, from the slight tremor in his hands to the beads of sweat he'd deliberately applied to his forehead. The performance had to be flawless. Officer Wilson smirked clearly, enjoying the perceived power imbalance. "You have our consultation fee," he demanded, not bothering with pretense. Elijah nodded, reaching beneath the counter to retrieve an envelope. $5,000, as requested, he said, sliding it across the counter with apparent reluctance. What the officers couldn't see was that each bill had been treated with a specialized chemical compound that would be invisible to the naked eye, but would appear under the right light frequency, a technique Elijah had learned during counterfeiting investigations in his military days. The compound was untraceable, odorless, and would remain active for weeks, allowing him to track the money's journey through their corruption network. Officer Reeves counted the cash with undisguised greed, while Officer Carter kept watch by the door. "Smart decision," Wilson said, pocketing the envelope. "We'll be back next month for our regular consultation. In the meantime, no more problems with stolen merchandise." As Wilson turned to leave, he deliberately brushed against a display of premium phone cases, sending them crashing to the floor. "Oops," he said with a cruel smile, "you should be more careful with your merchandise setup." Elijah bent to pick up the scattered items, using the movement to conceal his placement of a miniature tracking device inside Carter's jacket pocket as the officer moved to help Wilson create more disarray. The device, no larger than a button battery, would allow Elijah to monitor their movements for the next 48 hours. "Have a good day, officers," Elijah said, his voice subdued, as they finally departed, leaving the shop in disarray as a final reminder of their power. The moment their patrol car pulled away, Elijah's demeanor transformed. He moved with decisive efficiency, locking the front door and activating the surveillance network he'd established throughout the surrounding 8-block radius. Within minutes, he was tracking the officers' movements via the hidden device, watching as they made 2 more stops at businesses owned by immigrants, brief visits that likely involved similar protection schemes. At 6:45 that evening, the tracking signal led Elijah to an abandoned warehouse in a former industrial area near the Oakland waterfront. He positioned himself on a neighboring rooftop with a clear vantage point, deploying a parabolic microphone capable of capturing conversations through windows. Through high-powered optics, Elijah observed all 5 members of the corrupt team gathered inside Holloway, Wilson, Reeves, Carter, and Murphy. They spread cash across a table, not just Elijah's payment, but collections from at least a dozen other businesses based on the stacks they sorted. "Washington paid up without trouble," Wilson reported to Holloway as they divided the money. "Thought he might be a problem, but he folded like they all do." Holloway nodded, appearing unsurprised. "They always do once they understand the reality of their situation. No one wants to lose everything they've built." Elijah recorded every word, every incriminating statement, as they discussed their next targets, all minority-owned businesses in areas slated for redevelopment. "Councilman Parker says they need that whole block cleared by Summer," Holloway instructed, referring to a street with primarily Black and Latino businesses. "The developer wants to break ground on the new complex in August, so step up the pressure on the holdouts." The extent of the corruption became clear, as they mentioned specific businesses, judges who would sign off on warrants without questions, and even prosecutors who would prioritize cases against targeted owners. Elijah's jaw tightened as he recorded evidence of a systematic campaign to drive minority business owners from neighborhoods designated for economic revitalization, a euphemism for gentrification that would benefit developers with connections to city officials. As the meeting concluded and the officers dispersed, Elijah tracked Officer Murphy, who had been assigned to patrol duty that night. Near midnight, on a quiet street in a predominantly Black neighborhood, Elijah witnessed Murphy stop a young Black teenager for no apparent reason. From his concealed position, he watched as Murphy demanded identification and began an aggressive search using racial slurs and excessive force when the teenager questioned the basis for the stop. Elijah moved quickly, approaching as if he were a random passerby walking his dog. "Evening, officer," he called, casually startling Murphy, who had believed himself unobserved. "Everything okay here?" Murphy straightened instantly, modifying his demeanor. "Police business. Keep moving, sir." Elijah stopped anyway, noting the teenager's split lip and the fear in his eyes. "Couldn't help but notice you didn't activate your body camera for this interaction," Elijah observed conversationally. "Department policy requires that for all stops, doesn't it? Section 402.3 of the Oakland PD manual, if I remember correctly. Murphy's expression shifted from annoyance to wariness. "You a lawyer or something, just a concerned citizen who understands proper police procedure," Elijah replied, his tone pleasant, but his eyes cold and evaluating. He turned to the teenager. "You okay, young man? Do you need medical attention?" Before the teen could answer, Murphy interjected, "He's fine. Just a routine stop." The officer's hand had moved subtly closer to his weapon, a tell that Elijah instantly recognized as insecurity, not genuine threat assessment. "I'm sure dispatch would be interested to know about this unrecorded stop," Elijah continued, pulling out his phone as if to call it in. "Or perhaps your supervisor would like to review how you're conducting community policing in this neighborhood." Murphy's demeanor changed immediately. "That won't be necessary," he said, turning to the teenager. "You can go. Just stay in your own neighborhood after dark. Understand?" The implied threat was clear, but the teenager was released. As Murphy retreated to his patrol car, he shot Elijah a venomous look. "You should mind your own business. You never know when you might need police help and find none available." Elijah merely smiled, having accomplished his goal of establishing himself as someone willing to intervene, a data point that would feed into the officer's assessment of him and potentially alter their approach. After Murphy drove away, Elijah approached the shaken teenager. "You all right?" The young man nodded, wiping blood from his lip. "Yeah. Thanks for stopping. Most people just keep walking." "I'm Elijah Washington," he introduced himself, offering a business card for Circuit Solutions. "What's your name?" "Andre Johnson," the teenager replied. "I was just walking home from my cousin's place. I didn't do anything." Elijah nodded. "I believe you." Does this happen often with that officer? Andre's bitter laugh confirmed what Elijah suspected. Him and the others like him. They roll through here every night, especially when they know kids are walking home from basketball or study groups. They say they're looking for drugs, but really they're just looking to mess with us. A further conversation revealed that Andre was Darius's cousin, creating an unexpected connection. Andre explained that the officers regularly harassed youth in this neighborhood, sometimes planting small amounts of drugs to justify arrests that would help meet unofficial quotas and build cases for high crime area designations that supported redevelopment plans. The pattern Elijah uncovered was more extensive and insidious than he had initially believed, not just extortion of businesses, but a coordinated campaign to criminalize and control entire communities based on race. As he walked Andre safely home, Elijah made a decision. Simply exposing the 5 corrupt officers wouldn't be sufficient. The system that enabled and protected them, from precinct leadership to city officials to developers benefiting from the targeted harassment, would need to be confronted and dismantled. The first move had been made. The pieces were in position. Now it was time to advance to the next phase of the operation. The bell above the door of Circuit Solutions jingled Friday morning as Officer Wilson entered alone, his swagger more pronounced than during previous visits. Elijah looked up from the circuit board he was repairing, instantly, noting the officer's dilated pupils, the slight tremor in his left hand, and the faint odor of alcohol beneath his aftershave, all indicators of a man under stress. Officer Wilson, Elijah acknowledged, setting aside his work. "I wasn't expecting another visit so soon." Wilson's smile didn't reach his eyes as he approached the counter. "Change of plans, Washington. Our expenses have increased unexpectedly." He leaned forward, invading Elijah's personal space, a deliberate intimidation tactic. "We're going to need another 3,000 by Monday." Elijah allowed himself to frown slightly, a calculated show of concern rather than the cold analysis actually occurring behind his eyes. "That's a significant increase with very short notice," he said carefully. "Business has been slow since your last visit." Wilson's expression hardened. "Not my problem. Figure it out." He glanced around the shop, gaze lingering on the expensive equipment. "Seems to me you've got plenty of assets here that could be liquidated if necessary." This was the moment Elijah had anticipated, an opportunity to test Wilson's specific vulnerabilities. He straightened slightly, allowing a subtle shift in his posture from shopkeeper to something more assertive. "That's a lot of money to come up with over a weekend," he said, voice dropping lower, more confident. especially with no guarantee the demands won't keep changing. Perhaps we should discuss a more sustainable arrangement. The change was slight, but unmistakable. For a fraction of a second, Wilson registered confusion at the altered dynamic at the man before him, who suddenly seemed less like prey and more like an equal. The officer's hand instinctively moved toward his weapon, a telling response to perceived challenge. "You." Questioning our arrangement, Wilson snarled, recovering quickly and shoving Elijah hard enough to make him step back. "Listen, boy, you don't get to negotiate. You pay what we say when we say, or we shut you down and make sure you never open another business in this city again." The racial slur was deliberate, expected, and Elijah absorbed it, along with the physical contact, filing both away as evidence, while allowing just enough steel to show in his gaze a brief, controlled glimpse of the warrior beneath the businessman's facade. "I understand, Elijah," replied, voice steady, but with a new undercurrent of authority that made Wilson blink. "I'll have your money on Monday." Wilson stepped back, visibly unsettled, though trying to hide it. "See that you do," he muttered, turning to leave. At the door, he paused. "And Washington, don't get any ideas about reporting this. Nobody would believe you anyway." After Wilson left, Elijah immediately reviewed the surveillance footage, noting with satisfaction the officer's body language. The seed of doubt had been planted. Wilson would report to Holloway that something felt off about their latest target, potentially accelerating their timeline and forcing them into less careful actions. By Saturday morning, the pressure campaign intensified exactly as Elijah had predicted. A patrol car parked conspicuously outside Circuit Solutions officers, questioning customers as they approached. Just routine community policing, they would say, while asking pointed questions about what services were being provided inside and suggesting that several electronics businesses in the area had been implicated in receiving stolen goods. Business dropped by 60% within hours, as word spread to avoid the shop. By noon, a city building inspector arrived with a clipboard and a smirk. Received anonymous complaints about code violations, he announced loudly in front of 3 potential customers who promptly left. The inspector proceeded to cite Circuit Solutions for 7 violations, from improper electrical wiring that had passed inspection just months earlier to insufficient emergency signage that had never been an issue before. The total fines came to $4,500, with a requirement to remedy all issues within 30 days or face closure. Elijah documented everything, maintaining his outward composure while inwardly mapping the expanding network of corruption. The building inspector's name went on his evidence board, along with photographs and timestamps. That evening, Elijah contacted Michael Chen, a former Delta Force teammate who had transitioned to cybersecurity work for a private contractor. "I need everything you can find on these accounts," Elijah said, sending encrypted files containing the financial information he'd gathered on Officer Wilson. Chen's response came within hours. Wilson had gambling debts exceeding $70,000 to an illegal operation run by associates of a local organized crime family. More importantly, Chen had traced a pattern of deposits to offshore accounts, linked to Detective Holloway, revealing a sophisticated money laundering operation that extended well beyond simple protection rackets. The connection between Holloway's accounts and several real estate development companies confirmed Elijah's theory about the larger gentrification scheme targeting minority neighborhoods. Armed with this intelligence, Elijah initiated the next phase of his plan. At 11:30 that night, he deliberately triggered a silent alarm at Circuit Solutions, then disappeared into the shadows across the street before police arrived. Officers Reeves and Murphy responded within minutes, conducting a cursory search of the seemingly empty building. Elijah's hidden cameras recorded their conversation as they moved through the darkened shop. "Perfect opportunity," Reeves said, pulling a small package from his jacket. "Washington's becoming a problem. Holloway wants him taken down hard." Murphy looked nervous, but didn't object as Reeves planted the package containing what appeared to be several ounces of cocaine in a hidden compartment beneath the repair counter. "Tomorrow we come back with a drug dog that'll alert right here," Reeves continued, patting the counter. "Get a warrant, find this stuff, and Washington goes away for distribution. Shop gets seized under civil forfeiture, and some grateful white business owner gets a good deal on the lease next month. "What if he fights it?" Murphy asked, glancing around uneasily. "With his military background," and all Reeves laughed. "Military background just makes the story better. Traumatized vet turns to dealing. The DA will run with it, especially with our testimony backing it up. Trust me, we've done this before." From his observation post, Elijah watched the officers leave their conversation and actions captured in high-definition video. "Now I have you," he murmured, sending the footage to secure cloud storage. "The trap is set." Tomorrow would bring the confrontation he'd been meticulously preparing for, a calculated escalation that would force his adversaries to reveal the full extent of their corruption. The chess pieces were positioned. The endgame was approaching. Dawn broke over Oakland with a fog that shrouded the streets in ghostly gray, mirroring the calculated ambiguity of Elijah Washington's next move. Circuit Solutions remained closed, its security gates down and lights off, when Officers Reeves and Murphy arrived with the drug detection dog and warrant they'd arranged overnight. Their confident expressions faltered when they found the building empty, no sign of the shop owner they expected to arrest in a dramatic public takedown. Inside his surveillance post, 2 blocks away, Elijah watched their confusion with the detached assessment of a battlefield commander. Their operation was already derailing from its scripted path, creating the first cracks in their confidence. While the officers conferred with increasingly agitated radio calls, Elijah implemented the next phase of his plan. Officer Wilson arrived home after his night shift to find a manila envelope slipped under his apartment door. Inside were detailed photographs of his visits to the illegal gambling establishment, records of his mounting debts, and copies of bank statements showing suspicious deposits far exceeding his police salary. A single typewritten note read, "I know everything." Elijah's surveillance showed Wilson's panic as he immediately called Detective Holloway, his hands shaking so badly he dropped the phone twice. Within an hour, Holloway had ordered all 5 members of his corrupt team to meet at their warehouse, unwittingly playing directly into Elijah's strategy of forcing them to gather where his surveillance was most comprehensive. Meanwhile, Elijah had arranged for Andre Johnson to position himself safely on a rooftop overlooking a quiet street where Officer Murphy would patrol that afternoon. Armed with a high-definition video camera and clear instructions to remain completely hidden, Andre would document the confrontation Elijah had carefully orchestrated. At precisely 2:15, Elijah stepped into Murphy's path as the officer made his rounds, the timing calculated to ensure they were alone. Murphy recognized him immediately, hand moving instinctively toward his weapon. "Mr. Washington," he said, voice tense. "Shouldn't you be dealing with some serious charges right about now?" Elijah smiled, the expression never reaching his eyes. "About that," he replied calmly. "I believe you and Officer Reeves visited my shop last night around 11:45. You planted approximately 4 ounces of cocaine in a hidden compartment beneath my front counter." Officer Reeves stated, and I quote, "Washington's becoming a problem. Holloway wants him taken down hard." The color drained from Murphy's face. "I don't know what you're talking about," he stammered, but his eyes darted nervously, giving away his shock at being quoted verbatim. "I think you do," Elijah continued, maintaining a conversational tone while cataloging every micro-expression on Murphy's face. "Just like I know about the 17 other businesses you've helped frame in the last 3 years. Like Marcus Jenkins' Jamaican restaurant, where you planted marijuana in the storage room after he refused to pay increased protection money." Murphy's hand now rested openly on his holster, his breathing accelerated. "You're making accusations against a police officer. That's a dangerous game, Washington. Not accusations. Facts," Elijah corrected. "Facts, supported by video evidence, financial records, and testimony from your victims. Facts that document a criminal conspiracy involving you, Reeves, Wilson, Carter, and Detective Holloway, along with certain members of the City Council and Building Department." He stepped closer, invading Murphy's space, just as the officers had done to him. "Facts that are currently stored in multiple secure locations, scheduled for automatic release to federal authorities, news media, and social media platforms, if anything happens to me or my business." Murphy attempted to regain control of the situation, reaching for his handcuffs. "That's it. You're under arrest for threatening an officer." Elijah made no move to resist as Murphy approached. But when the officer attempted to grab his arm, Elijah executed a fluid defensive maneuver that left Murphy suddenly disarmed his service weapon now in Elijah's hand. The movement was so swift, so professionally executed, that Murphy stood frozen in shock. 15 years, Delta Force Elijah explained, quietly examining the weapon before expertly removing the magazine and clearing the chamber, specialized in close quarters, combat, and hostage rescue. He handed the unloaded weapon back to Murphy, who took it with trembling hands. "That was your only warning," Elijah said, stepping back. "Tell Holloway he's targeted the wrong business owner this time. I'm not one of your usual victims." He turned and walked away, leaving Murphy shaken and struggling to process what had just happened. The encounter had achieved exactly what Elijah intended, demonstrating capabilities that would force the corrupt officers to reevaluate their approach while planting seeds of distrust among them. Who had betrayed their operation? How much did Washington really know? Could he truly have evidence against all of them? The psychological warfare had begun. By evening, Elijah's surveillance of the warehouse captured the emergency meeting of all 5 corrupt officers. Through directional microphones, he recorded their increasingly heated discussion. "He knew exactly what we did word for word." Murphy insisted, still visibly shaken. "He quoted what you said in the shop, Reeves. He knew about the cocaine, the exact amount, everything." Holloway paced the room, his usual confidence replaced by calculating anger. "He's bluffing. Has to be. No way he could have that kind of surveillance." "What if he's not bluffing?" Wilson asked, the envelope of photos spread before him. "He has pictures of me at Salvatore's gambling den, bank records. He even knows about the offshore accounts. Someone's talking," Reeves snarled. "One of us or someone in the department. Or he really does have the place wired," Carter suggested. "He runs an electronics shop, for Christ's sake. Who knows what kind of equipment he has?" Holloway silenced them with a sharp gesture. "It doesn't matter how he knows. What matters is shutting him down before he can use whatever he has." His decision came quickly, decisive, but reckless, exactly what Elijah had anticipated. "We end this tonight. Break into his house. Send a real message. Make it clear what happens to people who threaten police officers." Elijah allowed himself a grim smile as he listened. They were abandoning procedure, escalating to direct criminal action in a panic, creating evidence that couldn't be explained away as proper police work. Everything was proceeding according to his assessment of their psychological profiles. That night, officers Reeves and Carter, dressed in black and wearing gloves, broke into Elijah's modest home in a quiet residential neighborhood. They moved with the awkward stealth of men accustomed to operating with the protection of badges rather than true covert skills. The house appeared empty, though meticulously organized. In the living room, they found framed photographs and shadow boxes displaying military commendations, a silver star, 2 bronze stars, multiple combat deployments across 3 continents. Pictures showed a younger Elijah, with high-ranking military officers standing alongside Delta Force teams with faces blurred for security. One photo showed him shaking hands with a former Secretary of Defense. "Jesus," Carter whispered. "This guy's the real deal." As they moved deeper into the house, motion sensors silently triggered, activating Elijah's prepared response. The lights suddenly cut out, plunging the house into darkness. When emergency flashlights clicked on, the officers found all doors had electronically locked. A television screen flickered to life in the living room, showing Elijah's face. "Gentlemen," his recorded message began, "I've faced terrorists who underestimated me. None of them made that mistake twice." The officers tried their radios, finding only static. "Breaking and entering is a felony," the recording continued, "especially for police officers acting outside their authority. You should know that everything happening right now is being recorded from multiple angles, adding to the considerable evidence I've already accumulated against you and your operation." Reeves tried the front door, finding it securely locked. "This is your opportunity to make a choice," Elijah's recording explained calmly. "Continue down this path of corruption and face the consequences, or become witnesses against Detective Holloway and the others involved in this conspiracy. The choice is yours, but it must be made tonight." The house phones began to ring simultaneously. Carter picked one up hesitantly. Hello, now let's discuss how this ends before it gets worse for you. Elijah's live voice came through the line. Because believe me, officers, it can get much worse. Is Elijah crossing a line by trapping these officers in his home? Or is he justified after they broke in, intending to harm him? Comment number 1. If you think he's going too far. Or number 2, if you believe these corrupt cops deserve whatever happens next. Don't forget to like and subscribe to find out how these officers respond to being caught in Elijah's trap. What would you do if you were in Reeves or Carter's position right now? The next part reveals how Elijah turns the tables completely and the corrupt system begins to crumble. In the darkness of Elijah Washington's living room, officers, Reeves and Carter, stood frozen in the harsh reality of their situation. The tables dramatically turned. Elijah's disembodied voice continued through the phone, calm and methodical. "Let me be clear about your current circumstances," he explained. "You've broken into my home without a warrant. You're carrying unregistered weapons not issued by your department. Your radio communications have been scrambled. And everything from the moment you approached my property is being recorded in high definition from multiple angles." A soft click sounded and recessed lighting activated, revealing hidden cameras in the ceiling corners. Now Elijah continued, "We're going to have a conversation about Detective Holloway's operation." For the next 47 minutes, Elijah conducted a masterful remote interrogation using psychological techniques refined through years of military intelligence work. He never threatened or raised his voice, instead employing pregnant silences, strategic revelations of information he already possessed, and careful manipulation of the growing tension between the two officers. "Officer Reeves," he said at one point, "your partner doesn't know about your private arrangement with Judge Cantwell, does he? The one where certain warrants get expedited in exchange for reducing his daughter's DUI charges last summer." The shock on Carter's face confirmed Elijah's intelligence was accurate, creating an immediate fracture in trust between the officers. "How could you possibly know that?" Reeves demanded, voice hoarse. "The same way I know about the offshore account Holloway established in the Cayman Islands under the name West Hollow Investments," Elijah replied smoothly. "The same way I know that your protection racket has extorted over $800,000 from minority business owners in the past 3 years, with 60% flowing upward to Captain Dennison and Councilman Parker." The systematic dismantling of their secrets continued until Officer Carter, the younger and less hardened of the two, broke first. "This is bigger than us," he admitted, looking nervously at Reeves. "Holloway runs everything. He tells us which businesses to target, how much to demand. The money goes through him and he handles the distribution up the chain. We're just following orders. Following orders to destroy people's livelihoods based on their race," Elijah noted coldly. "Were you just following orders when you planted evidence in my shop last night? When you framed Marcus Jenkins and 17 other business owners?" Reeves, sensing the direction of the interrogation, attempted to regain control. "What do you want Washington money? Because whatever you're thinking, you can't win against the entire department." Elijah's laugh held no humor. "I don't want money, Officer Reeves. I want justice. And as for winning, I've faced worse odds against more dangerous opponents than a handful of corrupt cops." After nearly an hour, having extracted valuable confessions and confirmed key details of the corruption network, Elijah unlocked the doors remotely. "You're free to leave," he informed them. "But understand this, I now have recorded confessions to add to my evidence. If anything happens to me, my business, or anyone associated with me, everything gets released simultaneously to the FBI, the Department of Justice, and every major news outlet in California." As the shaken officers hurried out, Elijah added one final warning. "You have 24 hours to decide where you stand when this all comes down, because it will come down with or without your cooperation." The following morning, Elijah reopened Circuit Solutions, as if nothing had happened, a calculated move designed to unbalance his opponents. He assisted customers, repaired devices, and maintained a perfect facade of normalcy while monitoring the increasingly panicked communications between the corrupt officers. By mid-afternoon, Detective Holloway had reached his breaking point. He arrived at Circuit Solutions with all 4 officers, his face flushed with barely contained rage as he stormed through the door. Customers immediately sensed the tension, some quietly slipping out, while others backed away from the confrontation unfolding in the center of the shop. Elijah Washington Holloway announced loudly, "You're under arrest for assaulting officers Reeves and Carter last night during the execution of their duties." The detective nodded to Wilson and Murphy, who moved forward with handcuffs ready. Elijah stood calmly behind the counter, making no move to resist, but raising his voice just enough to ensure it carried clearly. "Detective Holloway, I haven't left my shop since opening this morning, as my security footage will confirm. Your officers, however, broke into my home last night without a warrant, which my security system documented thoroughly." With deliberate movements, Elijah reached beneath the counter and activated a series of switches. Throughout the shop, small red lights blinked on as hidden cameras began live streaming to multiple social media platforms simultaneously. In fact, he continued, "We're now broadcasting live to over 5,000 viewers across several platforms. Perhaps you'd like to explain to them why you're attempting to arrest me without a warrant or probable cause." Holloway faltered momentarily before regaining his composure. "Turn those cameras off immediately. Recording police officers is illegal." "Actually," Elijah replied, "California law explicitly permits recording of police officers performing their duties in public places. Penal Code Section 148 grams specifically states that recording does not constitute interference with an officer's duties." The calm recitation of the exact statute number further unbalanced Holloway, who hadn't expected such precise legal knowledge. As customers began recording with their phones, Holloway changed tactics, becoming more aggressive. "We have evidence you've been dealing drugs from this location," he declared, signaling Officer Reeves to move toward the counter where they had planted cocaine the previous night. "We're executing a search based on reliable information from confidential informants." Elijah smiled slightly. "Are you referring to the cocaine that Officers Reeves and Murphy planted beneath this counter last night at approximately 11:47 p.m.? The same cocaine that I removed and documented before contacting the DEA this morning to report police corruption." The color drained from Holloway's face as Reeves frantically searched the hiding spot, finding it empty. The livestream viewer count had now jumped to over 12,000 as the confrontation was being shared across platforms. Social media comments scrolled rapidly on a monitor visible to Elijah, the public witnessing in real time what had previously happened to minority business owners behind closed doors. "You have no idea who you're dealing with," Holloway hissed, abandoning pretense as he stepped aggressively toward Elijah. "I own judges in this town. You think some cameras are going to save you? We can make you disappear with one phone call." Officer Murphy, increasingly uncomfortable with the escalating situation and aware of the growing audience, attempted to de-escalate. "Detective, maybe we should continue this back at the station." Holloway ignored him, his focus entirely on Elijah, as years of unchallenged power collided with unexpected resistance. "You will turn over any evidence you claim to have against my officers immediately," he demanded. "This is your last warning." The bell above the door chimed as local news crews began arriving, alerted by the viral live stream. Cameras and microphones pushed forward, capturing Holloway's increasingly unhinged behavior. Detective Elijah said clearly, "For the benefit of all recording devices, I have documented evidence of a systematic extortion operation targeting minority-owned businesses across 3 districts. I have financial records showing unexplained deposits to offshore accounts. I have testimony from 18 business owners who were framed with planted evidence when they couldn't pay your demands. And I have video recordings of your officers admitting to all of it." Additional police units arrived outside, responding to calls from concerned citizens about officers threatening a business owner. As they entered, Elijah recognized Lieutenant Maria Diaz, a decorated officer known for her anti-corruption stance. "What's happening here, Detective Holloway?" she demanded, taking in the scene with trained eyes. "Why are you confronting this business owner without backup or proper documentation?" Holloway attempted to assert authority, but the situation had spiraled beyond his control. "This is my operation, Lieutenant. We have reason to believe this establishment is involved in illegal activities." "Then, where is your warrant?" Diaz questioned, noting the news cameras now recording everything. "And why does it appear you're threatening the owner rather than conducting a proper investigation?" Sensing the shift in power dynamics, Elijah spoke directly to Lieutenant Diaz. "I believe these men are attempting to cover up crimes under color of authority. I have evidence you need to see." The corrupt system that had operated with impunity for years was now exposed to public scrutiny, the carefully constructed facade crumbling under the harsh light of transparency and accountability. The first domino had fallen. The Oakland Police Department's Central Precinct hummed with unusual tension as Lieutenant Diaz led Elijah Washington through the bullpen toward the conference room. Behind them, Detective Holloway and his 4 officers followed under the watchful eyes of internal affairs investigators who had been summoned immediately. The evidence Elijah presented over the next 3 hours left even the most skeptical officers stunned. High-definition video of officers planting evidence, recorded conversations explicitly discussing extortion targets based on race, financial records showing impossible wealth accumulation, and testimony from business owners who had lost everything to the corrupt scheme. Lieutenant Diaz, who revealed she had been quietly building a case against Holloway for months, but lacked sufficient evidence to overcome departmental resistance, worked methodically through Elijah's documentation. "This is beyond precinct-level corruption," she acknowledged, grimly reviewing offshore account statements. "This reaches into city government, the courts, possibly even the DA's office." By evening, Holloway and his team had been placed on administrative leave, pending investigation, their badges and service weapons confiscated. They were released with strict orders not to leave the city or contact any potential witnesses, standard procedure that Elijah knew would give Holloway time to activate his protection network within the system. Exhausted but vigilant, Elijah returned to Circuit Solutions after dark, unlocking the front door only to freeze at the threshold. The shop had been vandalized in his absence, display cases shattered, and inventory scattered across the floor. The walls were spray-painted with racial slurs and crude threats. Specialized repair equipment lay in deliberate ruins, and someone had poured corrosive chemicals over the main workstation, destroying thousands of dollars in electronics. The message was clear: the corrupt officers might be temporarily sidelined, but their allies remained active and dangerous. As Elijah methodically photographed the destruction for insurance purposes, his phone rang with an unknown number. "You should have minded your own business." Holloway's voice came through without preamble. "I tried to tell you how things work in this town, but you just couldn't listen." Elijah remained silent, recording the call through an app designed for exactly this purpose. "You think turning over some evidence changes anything?" Holloway continued, his tone shifting from anger to smug confidence. "I own judges in this town, Washington. By tomorrow morning, those files will be sealed under national security pretexts. By next week, you'll be facing charges for everything from tax evasion to terrorism. That's how the game is played." "This isn't a game," Elijah replied finally. "And unlike your previous victims, I'm not playing." Holloway laughed. "We'll see. By the way, your friend's cousin Andre is at shame about the drugs we found in his backpack tonight. With his prior juvenile record, he's looking at 5 to 10 years minimum. Judge Harmon will make sure of it." The call ended, leaving Elijah standing amid the wreckage of his business with cold fury building in his chest. Within minutes, he confirmed that Andre Johnson had indeed been arrested hours earlier by officers from a neighboring precinct known to be aligned with Holloway. The charges were clearly fabricated possession with intent to distribute based on evidence that had mysteriously appeared in his possession. Elijah's sources within the department revealed that Andre was being held without bail on orders from Judge Malcolm Harmon, a name that had appeared repeatedly in Holloway's phone records. The corrupt detective had been telling the truth about his connections. The system was closing ranks to protect its own. Over the next 48 hours, Elijah encountered the full force of the corrupt network's defensive capabilities. His formal complaints were mysteriously lost in bureaucratic processes. Witnesses, who had previously provided statements, suddenly refused to cooperate, citing threats to their families or businesses. The internal affairs investigation stalled as key evidence was deemed inconclusive by reviewing officers with connections to Holloway. Even Lieutenant Diaz found herself reassigned to Traffic Division after pushing too hard for federal involvement. The extent of the corruption became painfully clear when Elijah's attorney attempted to file motions for Andre's release, only to discover that Judge Harmon had expedited the case to ensure maximum penalties. The system wasn't merely protecting Holloway, it was demonstrating its power to crush anyone who challenged it. Standing in his attorney's office as another motion was denied, Elijah came to a decision. The conventional paths to justice had been systematically blocked by those who controlled the system from within. If justice would not come through official channels, he would have to create his own path. "We've tried it their way," he told his increasingly frustrated lawyer. "Now we try it mine." That evening, Elijah activated a network he hadn't called upon since leaving the military former Delta Force operators who owed him their lives from missions in Afghanistan, Iraq, and countries whose names never appeared in official reports. Within hours, 5 highly trained veterans with specialized skills in surveillance, cyber operations, and tactical planning had arrived in Oakland. Setting up in a secure location, Elijah had prepared for exactly this contingency. "The target isn't just Holloway anymore," Elijah explained, as they gathered around detailed maps of Oakland's government district. "We're looking at a network that includes at least 3 judges, 2 city council members, and a real estate developer named Victor Chambers, who appears to be financing much of the operation." Michael Chen, the cyber specialist who had helped trace Holloway's finances, projected documents onto a wall screen. "The pattern is clear once you see it," he explained. "They identify neighborhoods with primarily minority-owned businesses, target those businesses with escalating police harassment, and force owners out through either financial pressure or trumped-up charges. Once the properties are vacant or seized through civil forfeiture, Chambers Development Company acquires them at below-market rates through connections on the city council." Another team member, former Master Sergeant Rivera, highlighted points on the map. "They've successfully cleared 4 commercial blocks in the past 3 years, all now redeveloped as upscale retail and dining. 3 more areas are currently in process, including the street where your shop is located." The systematic nature of the operation was breathtaking in its scope and callousness. A coordinated campaign to eliminate black and brown-owned businesses under the guise of urban renewal while enriching those who controlled the pallet process. Tomorrow night, Elijah instructed, "We implement full surveillance on all primary targets simultaneously. I want every meeting, every phone call, every text message documented. We focus on gathering evidence that can't be buried or dismissed evidence that will force federal intervention regardless of local corruption." The team moved with the synchronized efficiency of soldiers who had operated together in the most dangerous environments on Earth. Using equipment that exceeded even police department capabilities, they established observation posts covering the homes, offices, and meeting places of every identified member of the corruption network. Elijah himself took the most dangerous assignment, hacking into the city's surveillance system using backdoor access provided by a sympathetic IT technician who had witnessed the destruction of his brother's business by Holloway's team. By morning, they had mapped the movements and communications of the entire network, revealing connections that even Elijah hadn't anticipated. The corruption extended to the district attorney's office, where an assistant DA regularly dismissed cases against Chambers' associates while aggressively prosecuting charges against targeted business owners. At police headquarters, Captain Dennis Rourke received regular payments, disguised as consulting fees, to ensure officers who questioned Holloway's operations were reassigned or discredited. The most disturbing discovery came at midday when Elijah's team documented a meeting between Holloway Judge Harmon and Councilman Parker in a private room at an exclusive club. Through directional microphones, they recorded the 3 men discussing not only Andre's case, but a broader strategy to accelerate the clearance of the remaining minority businesses in the targeted neighborhoods. "The Washington situation has created a timing problem," Councilman Parker stated, reviewing documents spread across the table. "Chambers needs that entire block cleared by August for the groundbreaking ceremony. The mayor's already committed to attending." Judge Harmon nodded thoughtfully. "I can expedite the civil forfeiture proceedings on the remaining properties once your officers find the necessary evidence." The implication was clear: they would manufacture whatever justification was needed to seize the properties of business owners who refused to sell. "What about Washington himself?" Parker asked. "He's becoming a significant liability." Holloway's response sent a chill through Elijah as he listened to the recording. "Leave Washington to me. By this time next week, he'll either be in custody on terrorism charges or he'll have had an unfortunate accident. Either way, his shop will be available for redevelopment on schedule." The casual discussion of his planned elimination, treated as simply another business matter to be resolved, and confirmed what Elijah had suspected. The corruption wasn't just about money or power. It had reached the point where human lives were considered acceptable collateral damage in service of their profit scheme. With this final piece of evidence secured, Elijah gathered his team for the culminating phase of the operation. "Tomorrow," he announced, "we end this. Not just for me, but for everyone they've victimized." The plan they developed would strike simultaneously at every level of the corrupt system, leaving no room for evasion or denial. Justice delayed would finally be justice delivered. Dawn broke over Oakland as Elijah Washington's team moved into position for the final phase of their operation. After a week of meticulous intelligence gathering and strategic planning, the pieces were in place for a coordinated strike against the corrupt network that had terrorized minority business owners for years. Elijah had personally briefed trusted FBI contacts the previous night, providing irrefutable evidence of corruption, crossing jurisdictional boundaries, and involving multiple government agencies, crimes that demanded federal intervention, regardless of local interference. At precisely 9:15, as Judge Harmon arrived at the courthouse for a private meeting with the prosecutor handling Andre Johnson's case, two of Elijah's team members, disguised as maintenance workers, activated specialized surveillance equipment in the judge's chambers. Every word of the conversation that followed was captured in crystal clarity as Harmon instructed the prosecutor to pursue maximum charges regardless of the flimsy evidence. "Holloway wants this kid put away as an example," Harmon stated bluntly. "Make sure the jury selection favors conviction. I'll handle any legal issues that arise." Simultaneously, Michael Chen had positioned himself near City Hall, using specialized equipment to intercept communications between Councilman Parker and Victor Chambers as they discussed the upcoming urban renewal project. "Washington's shop is the key property," Chambers explained over the encrypted line they thought secure. "Once we have that corner location, we control the entire block. The police action should clear it within the week, and then we can proceed with demolition by month's end." Parker's response was equally incriminating. "The zoning change is already approved. As soon as the properties are cleared, you'll have your permits. The usual compensation arrangements apply, of course." Across town, Detective Holloway met with Captain Rourke in what they believed was a secure location, a boat owned by the captain moored at a private marina. They had swept for conventional surveillance devices, but missed the military-grade equipment Elijah's team had deployed. "Washington has to disappear," Holloway insisted. "He knows too much, has too much evidence. If he gets to the feds, this whole operation collapses." Captain Rourke nodded gravely. "Use the Richardson Protocol. Make it look like a drug deal gone wrong. Plant the evidence afterward. I'll make sure the investigating officers understand the situation." The Richardson Protocol, Elijah noted, grimly referred to the suspicious death of a community activist 3 years earlier who had begun asking questions about police harassment of minority businesses. By noon, every member of the corruption network had been documented engaging in explicitly illegal activities. Elijah transmitted the complete evidence package to Lieutenant Diaz, who had been working with federal authorities despite her official reassignment. Within hours, a coordinated operation involving FBI agents and trusted officers from Internal Affairs descended simultaneously on multiple locations throughout Oakland. Elijah watched from a distance as Holloway, Judge Harmon, Councilman Parker, and Victor Chambers were taken into custody during their weekly planning meeting at Chambers' office. The evidence was overwhelming: financial records, showing millions in illegal profits, recorded conversations, explicitly discussing the targeting of minority businesses, and documented cases of evidence tampering and judicial misconduct. Most damning was the detailed plan to eliminate Elijah himself, which elevated the charges to conspiracy to commit murder. As federal agents led the handcuffed conspirators through the lobby of Chambers' office building, news cameras captured every moment. The story broke across national media within hours. A corrupt network of police judges and city officials exposed for systematically targeting black and brown business owners to facilitate lucrative development deals. With federal authorities now in control of the investigation, the corruption network's influence couldn't protect them. Andre Johnson was released that afternoon as the fabricated charges against him collapsed under scrutiny. Officers Wilson, Reeves, Carter, and Murphy, facing decades in prison, quickly turned on Holloway and each other, providing even more details about the extent of the operation in exchange for reduced sentences. The final confrontation came 3 days later, when Elijah visited the federal detention center where Holloway was being held pending trial. The detective, stripped of his badge and authority, glared at Elijah across the visitor's room table. "You've made a serious mistake," Holloway threatened, leaning forward. "I still have friends on the outside. This isn't over. It was over the moment you targeted my business." Elijah replied calmly. "You chose the wrong person to threaten, detective." Holloway's expression twisted with rage and underlying racial animus. "A black man could never bring down our operation," he snarled. "You people don't have the connections or the power. Someone must have helped you." With lightning reflexes honed through years of combat, Elijah caught Holloway's wrist as the detective lunged across the table, a makeshift weapon fashioned from a sharpened plastic spoon clutched in his hand. Elijah disarmed him with expert precision, subduing the larger man before guards could even respond to the commotion. Releasing Holloway to the custody of rushing officers, Elijah stood and straightened his jacket. "This isn't about race," he said, looking down at the restrained detective. "It's about justice, something you forgot long ago." As Holloway was dragged away, screaming threats and obscenities, Elijah walked out of the detention center for the last time, closing that chapter of the confrontation. 3 months later, Circuit Solutions had been fully restored, the damage from the vandalism erased with new equipment and expanded facilities. The shop had become something of a community hub with Elijah, offering free technical training programs for neighborhood youth interested in electronics and computer science. The federal investigation had expanded well beyond Oakland, uncovering similar corruption networks in 3 other California cities, targeting minority neighborhoods for redevelopment. Using his military connections and the recognition he'd gained from exposing the corruption, Elijah established a legal defense fund for minority business owners facing discrimination or harassment. The fund provided resources for legal representation and security systems for vulnerable businesses, creating a support network that corrupt officials couldn't easily intimidate. Working closely with Lieutenant Diaz, who had been promoted to captain following the scandal, Elijah helped implement community policing reforms and accountability measures designed to prevent similar abuses of power. Civilian oversight committees with actual authority were established, and body camera requirements were strengthened with penalties for non-compliance. On a warm afternoon 6 months after the arrests, Elijah watched Andre Johnson confidently explaining a computer repair to a customer. The young man had joined Circuit Solutions as an apprentice. While attending community college, his criminal record expunged as part of the broader Justice Department review of cases tainted by the corrupt network. "You know," Elijah said when the customer had left, "you have a real talent for this work. You should consider specializing in security systems after you finish your degree." Andre smiled, the confidence in his expression a far cry from the frightened teenager Elijah had first encountered. "I've been thinking about it. There's a lot of businesses in our community that could use better protection." Elijah nodded, looking around at the thriving shop that had nearly been destroyed by corruption and racism. "Never let anyone tell you what you can't achieve or where you don't belong," he said. "The system can change, but only if we're brave enough to change it." As the afternoon sunlight streamed through the windows of Circuit Solutions, illuminating the space where justice had ultimately prevailed against seemingly insurmountable odds, Elijah Washington knew that while one corrupt network had been dismantled, the work of creating true equality would continue. But for today, in this corner of Oakland, the right side had won. What would you do if faced with corruption in your community? Would you have the courage to stand up like Elijah did? Leave a comment sharing your thoughts on this story of justice and resilience. If you enjoyed this tale of one man fighting against a corrupt system, please hit that like button, subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories, and share this video with someone who needs to hear that standing up for what's right is always worth the fight. Thank you for watching, and remember, sometimes the most powerful force for change is someone who refuses to be intimidated. This story powerfully illustrates that justice often requires both courage and strategy when facing systemic corruption. Elijah Washington succeeded not merely through righteous anger, but through meticulous planning, gathering evidence, and understanding the psychology of his opponents. He demonstrated that confronting racial discrimination demands patience, intelligence, and tactical thinking. The narrative reveals how racism can become institutionalized within systems of power, creating self-reinforcing networks of corruption that target minority communities. When official channels fail due to this entrenched corruption, sometimes extraordinary measures become necessary to expose the truth. Equally important is the lesson that one person with the right skills, determination, and moral clarity can catalyze change even against overwhelming odds. Elijah didn't just seek personal revenge. He fought for community, wide justice, and created lasting structural reforms. The story also highlights the importance of community solidarity. By establishing resources to protect other minority business owners and mentoring youth, like Elijah, ensured that his victory extended beyond his personal situation. Perhaps most significantly, we learn that systems can change when brave individuals refuse to accept injustice as inevitable. True change requires not just exposing corruption, but building new structures of accountability, support, and opportunity that empower communities to protect themselves against future discrimination. What would you do if faced with systematic discrimination in your community? Would you have the courage to stand against corruption like Elijah, or would fear keep you silent? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you've ever witnessed or experienced racial discrimination, what resources helped you navigate that situation? Our community grows stronger when we share these experiences. If this story of resilience and justice resonated with you, please hit that like button to help others find this important message. Subscribe to our channel for more powerful narratives about overcoming injustice and standing up for what's right. Don't forget to share this video with someone who might need encouragement to fight against discrimination in their own life. Thank you for watching, and remember, sometimes the most powerful act of resistance is simply refusing to be intimidated when the system is stacked against you.